Hi people, my name is Linda Alela, and yes, we meet again on Politics as we view it. So much is happening in the country politically.
Nikatoa maoni yangu ya kwamba tumefika hapo kwa sababu hatusikizi wa Kenya.
President Moi used to say, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. You probably remember that, right? Siasa mbaya is what we have played in the country for the longest of time. They sometimes say it is healthy because then it is actually what keeps us going. But then again, when it is extremely at that level of dog whistle, then we must get worried. Today, we take a look at the turbulent deputy presidency. The other time, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, was asking himself, and in the presence of the public, as to whether this deputy presidency seat is a jinxed seat. We would want to say yes, based on what it is that we have seen in the country, and we'll be looking at the history or the historical context to this, because then we witnessed what played out during the Uhuru reign, of course, with his deputy, who's now the current president.
Hii kijana anaitwa Ruto, unajua kila weekend anatanga kila pahali. Atakuwa anapitia hizi machorochoro. Akiona kuna kitu inaenda kona mumwambie, si namna hiyo?
Dr. William Samoei Ruto, who equally proceeded to say that he would not allow for that to happen during his reign because of the difficult times that he went through during the Jubilee times. But guess what? Today, his deputy is crying foul.
He promised the people of Kenya that under his watch, his deputy will never be humiliated. Didn't he promise? We're asking him to keep that promise.
We'll be looking at what plays out not just in the country, but basically as well in Africa and maybe the global scene, just to get to understand whether these are some of the things that actually are playing out, in these different spaces when we're talking about deputy presidents and vice presidents for other countries. So historically, first of all, let us remember that, from the time that we got independence, indeed, we have had vice presidents until sometime in 2010, where there was the promulgation of the current constitution that we're using right now that got us having a deputy president as opposed to a vice president. The differences are clear because then during that time, it was the president who had the prerogative to proceed and nominate a vice president. Of course, this time around, there is always the say of the president in deciding who is going to be the deputy. But they decide before they get to go to the vote, and then Kenyans then will vote these two to form the presidency.
I present to you the Kenya Kwanza running mate candidate, my brother and friend, Rigathi.
But just why is it so difficult for the presidency to function or perhaps to work, all the way to the end of the term without the kinds of frictions that we get to witness today? Well, Article 150 of the Constitution speaks to the process of the removal of the deputy president. That is where we are at as a country.
There is a motion in the office of the Speaker of the National Assembly to be tabled and moved on Tuesday next week to impeach the deputy president.
When there is this kind of turbulence at that level, it trickles down to the people. It is us who then we will get actually to receive some delay in the question of development and so much more. Hence the reason why we must speak about this. So let's take a look at the controversies that revolve around these particular seats. And this push of pulling out, Rigathi Gachagua, who has spoken to the president or his boss, telling him, Mr. President, could you please just keep your house in order? A house that I will assume Mr. President is the husband and he is the wife, rhetorically. So why is it that they've not been able to keep this in order? just so we do not have some of these political dynamics that we get to witness today. Dynamics, and I mean, we have seen them saying that perhaps these are coming up because of the utterances of the deputy president. Some of them saying that this is basically happening because then he is trying to propagate, the Mount Kenya talk more than he is propagating basically what it is that would be the talk of the people of Kenya.
Nasikia watu wanasema wafanye yote bora wasifanye nini? Bora wasifanye nini? Wafanye yote lakini wasifanye nini? Wapange jama yote lakini wasifanye nini? Watupangie maneno yote lakini wasifanye nini?
Well, one would want to question that because even when you look at the African context, I know we are ethnocentric, as we always say, but we're always reminded that once you are a deputy president, once you're a president, you are a president of every single Kenyan. You're not a president of the Kalenjin or of the Luya and everything. And we have even seen in places like Nigeria, Buhari being reminded that, please, could you cut this, talk of French more than actually talking English? Because then the Anglophones kind of feel like they're being disenfranchised because you are the president of the country as opposed to being the president of a certain group. Well, those are some of the reasons. And sometimes we want to ask ourselves, when you look at some of these allegations as to what would warrant for the removal of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, do they hold any form of salt? Are they worth the salt? Those are the questions that people are asking. Some actually saying that perhaps we do not have a National Assembly that is strong enough to actually live by their words, because then they could not even do, or perhaps they could not proceed to impeach individuals that we all hoped would be impeached for purposes of making sure that the nation is in the best of state. In this case, I would, of course, want to pinpoint at the former agriculture, that is CS Mithika Leinturi. Why am I saying that perhaps this is just not a conversation that revolves around Kenya, that it cuts across, that it goes beyond? What is this one thing that gets the presidency or the presidents most of the times a little bit uncomfortable with their deputies? And sometimes even when they're uncomfortable, they will not hit them directly. They would perhaps use proxies to hit them. You remember the Uhuru government, yes? And, President Uhuru Kenyatta really outrightly towards the end of his term, came out to clearly show the country that he cannot back his deputy, who was again going for the presidency. We probably would have expected for him to back him. Instead, he opted to back the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Up until today, he's never been clear as to why he really detested, the existence of his deputy, at least at that particular time. It remains a mystery. Kenyans are probably expecting to hear what President William Ruto will say about the decry of his deputy, that is Rigathi Gachagua. Up until now, we have not gotten anything or any clear response from the president. Just what are the roles of the deputies? Perhaps this is one of the biggest reasons why there's always a problem between them and their bosses. We've not even talked about the deputy governors and all that. We have seen them as well going out there to say, could you please just outline clear roles for us to do so that we do not have this kind of frictions with our bosses? Most of the times it appears as though the deputies are always, eyeing the big seat so that when their bosses are out of the space, then they take up immediately. Is that the kind of politics that we actually want to play? They actually play a crucial role. But then again, some people then would argue these roles are more ceremonial. Sometimes these roles get us asking ourselves, would it be necessary for us to have quite clear ones that are enshrined in the Constitution, just so they don't have to wait for the president to tell them what to do next, because then they clearly are at the mercy of the president. You had him cry foul the other time, saying that, the president is intending to leave the nation, and he has not told me that he is leaving the nation. The person who's supposed to hold brief for the president in his absence.
But if I'm in the dark and I don't know what is happening, I am not an angel to know exactly where the president will be at what time, then it's not right.
Well, power dynamics, what goes into picking a deputy president? Could that have been the problem? I remember they said that, and these are the Kenya Kwanza guys who were saying that the time where they were trying to ban midnight oil to decide who's going to be the deputy, whether they should go for a woman, whether they should go for Kindiki Kithure, or whether they should go for Rigathi Gachagua.
The agreement was the running mate was supposed to come from Mount Kenya region. So those members of parliament who were already in parliament, including Rigathi Gachagua, who was also a member of parliament, were supposed to get into a room and agree to nominate one person who is going to be the running mate. And the candidates that were on the front line was Dende Nyoro, Alice Wahome, Rigathi Gachagua, and Professor Kithure Kindiki.
2 years into his reign, there's trouble in paradise. Just why is it so? And if there's nothing much for the deputy president to do, so what are we saying as taxpayers? Are we praying someone who's probably not doing much? Is it a disservice to the money that we dish out there, hard-earned sweat as a country, to just pay an individual who's not doing much? These are the questions that we ask. Of course, there's always that question of rivalry, of politics that plays out in the country. And that is so clear that it gets the relationship between these two, that is the president and his deputy, to be rather complicated. Well, it is interesting to watch what plays out in the global stage. And in the global stage, I'll also touch on what is in the continent. First off, let us remember that the United States is headed for an election. Just the other day, Joe Biden, just decided to say that, I'll step down from the race. And in stepping down, he endorsed his deputy, Kamalla Harris.
Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz?
Evidently showing that there was a good relationship between these two, because why would you decide to say that so-and-so is going to take up, if at all, then you don't have a good relationship. And we also remember just how, Barack Obama came out to campaign for Joe Biden, who as well was his deputy, just showing that, well, we had good blood when we were working together.
Choosing Joe to be my vice president was one of the best decisions I ever made, and he became a close friend. And I believe Joe has all the qualities we need in a president right now.
We would wish to have such a scenario. Questions linger as to whether when we are headed to 2027, general election, in the event that, say, President William Ruto says, I'm not going to run, would he recommend Rigathi Gachagua as the person to take over? That is under the party, that is the UDA party, if not the Kenya Kwanza. You want to ask yourself whether that is possible. Well, look at Equatorial Guinea. This is the funny bit. So the president of Equatorial Guinea, Obiang Nguema, decides to pick his son as his deputy. Sometimes you want to ask yourself, fine, he could be worth the salt based on the political career that he has had. He has held different capacities, that is at the level of government, as a leader. And so you want to ask yourself, why would the president wake up and decide to pick his son as a deputy? Trust issues? He does not have, are there no other citizens in Equatorial Guinea that are worth the salt? What is this one thing that gets African presidents a little bit scared and skeptical, in picking those ones that are going to deputize them? Look at Uganda next door. How many of us know just who is the deputy president? Hands up. Hands up. Museveni. We all, okay, I know, at least because I have done my little research, and we know that we have Jessica Alupo, who is the current deputy president. But guess what? Since 2021, Museveni got into power sometime in 1986, right? In 1986, well, you would want to assume that perhaps he picked a deputy and he was strong and he was confident that this is a person I want to get Uganda to the next level with, and maybe they would run the country together for all these years up until now. But every other time there's a change of deputy president or there's a change of vice president, and then you want to ask yourself, what is this that happens in between that Museveni cannot have the confidence to have one deputy president or one vice president all through? Question mark. But just even when they're there, how many of them have the confidence to speak out and, challenge the president? Sometimes go out there and say, Mr. President, on this one you have gone wrong. Just how much of a say do they have? Tanzania, our neighbors. After the reign of Magufuli, and may his soul rest in eternal peace, automatically Mama Samia Suluhu then takes up the mantle. But even as she takes up the mantle, you want to ask yourself, who is the deputy? And just how much of a say does he have? South Africa, during the Zuma times and the difficulties alongside his deputy Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the current president, even gets into power. And automatically, there are corruption cases leveled against Zuma, and Zuma is even hitting the jail. And you want to ask yourself, were they not good, so good of friends that perhaps you would probably expect for one of them to say that, well, this is the former president, and therefore, even in the process of just getting to prosecute him, we must follow some element of order. Or why is it that it's about Zuma himself and not the deputy, while they held this position of the presidency together? These are some of the questions you want to ask yourself. And you get, just saying that anyway, we all agree that perhaps this particular position of the deputy president is jinxed. The question in the country today is it possible for the National Assembly, for the Senate to proceed and impeach Rigathi Gachagua? The comebacks that we get to witness from the people who are, political allies of Rigathi Gachagua, arguing that, well, maybe our own is being hit. Are we trying to change this into a political or a tribal war of battle? Is it healthy for the country? Is it proper for the country to go that direction? Look at Zimbabwe. Well, there is a provision of vice presidents. And you realize that, underneath there are vice presidents. Perhaps, maybe that's the right way to go so that we avoid this kind of shenanigans, if not controversies, if not disputes that exist between presidents and the deputies. Maybe a president should have 2-3 other, deputy presidents or vice presidents under them, basically what we have seen in other countries. And maybe this would come in and reduce the kind of friction that we get to have. I don't know. Well, I am clearly just trying to say that perhaps this concern is not unique to us as a country. But then we need to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, while it is happening at that level of the presidency, at the executive, just how much does it affect the people of Kenya? Basic questions. Why would other countries opt to legally have more than one deputies? Number one question. Why do most African countries then have long-serving presidents who will not have the same deputy presidents in all these terms? Ngwema being one of them, who's opted to have, lastly, or perhaps at this point, his own son as deputy. And he's one of the longest-serving presidents in Africa. You want to ask yourself, why would you want to have someone consider their kin as a deputy? Another valid question. Why are deputy president seats or vice president seats more of ceremonial roles or ceremonial seats as opposed to, just having tangible roles for these particular individuals? Well, as we ponder on those questions, my name is Linda Alela, and this is Politics as we View It.